Great to be here, and I feel like I should be Oprah. You know, my favorite things. It feels like the session she used to do at Christmas every year. But I'm not giving away everything to everybody in the audience. Sorry. Anyway, just for those of you who are not aware of what I do, here's just a quick list. I've written a bunch of books. I do video training at lynda.com and LinkedIn Learning, and of course, I do live consulting services to mostly architectural firms around the country. If you need to get a hold of me specifically, here's some contact info, website, email address, and my Twitter. I might regret putting my email address up there, but you never know. All right. Anyway, dive right into Revit here. So I'm going to show you a couple things from each of the suites of CTC tools that I use pretty frequently when I'm doing work. I do a lot of content work for clients. And I've actually, a lot of the stuff I'm going to show you today I've been using like this week, in fact, because I've been working on a content project for a casework manufacturer. And I just find these tools are invaluable when you're doing a lot of, batch processing or a lot of the same sort of repetitive work over and over again. And you want that consistency. You want things to be clean and so forth. So there's a lot of great tools for that. So I'm going to start with one of the simple ones from the batch suite. Okay, so I'm just going to load up a file here. I'm sure you guys have all seen this file before, of course. Actually, let's do it with this guy. So here's one of these pieces of casework that I've been working on. It's just a really simple base cabinet, and these drawer fronts here are another nested family, and right now I kept the names generic, so they're just called style 1 through 4. You can see them over here on the I'm spacing out there, project browser. Forgot the name of this thing for a minute. You can see them over here on the project browser under casework. I've got style 1 through style 4, and you're able to swap out the different styles. So I made some changes to those styles, and now I want to reload. I added some hardware to them. And so this is a common thing that when you're working on content, you find yourself in a situation where you do a progressive change to the nested components, and then without some sort of a batch tool, you have to manually reload all of these families. But if we go to the Express Tools, and I've got the CTC BIM Batch Suite here first, there's two free tools here. I'm going to show you both of these, the Family Loader and Family Exporter. So I'm going to do the Family Loader first, and this, again, is just a really simple example of this. But I'll load this current project that you see right here, and I only opened it in the background just so you could kind of see it happen. But you don't even have to open it in the background. Okay, it can just be, you can load it remotely, if you will. So I'm going to open up this file, and so you point to the folder, okay, and then it lists all the files in that folder. You can either search in the subfolders or not. So in this case, I'm going to uncheck subfolders because I just want to get to that one file. I'll add that. So that's going to add that so this is, you're adding host projects and families. So you can load families into projects or into other families. So I've loaded a family, and then down here I'm going to add families and browse to that same general location that I was in a moment ago. But this time I'm going to go to this subfolder here called styles, and there's the 4 styles, style 1 through 4. There's a select all button right here, and I'll add all of them and click OK. So I've got 1 family and 4 families that I want to load into it. Now below that there's a few options. We can only reload families that are already in use in this family, or we could force it to load it into all of them regardless. And there is a little warning here that can increase file size. In this case it's only 4 families. I don't care. I'm going to load it into all of them. Then you can either overwrite the existing or the existing and its type parameters. Now the content that I'm loading in uses instance parameters, so in this case it really wouldn't matter too much which one of those I chose. So I'm just going to overwrite the existing because I'm interested in the geometry mainly. And then this is kind of a neat feature here. What I'm going to do is kind of pull this Windows Explorer window over here to show you. This is that same folder, and this is that file that we're looking at right now. So when it's done, what that checkbox means is it's going to create its normal backup, the sort of Revit backup with the 001 at the end, but it's also going to create a CTC backup, and I want you to see that when this is done. So I'm going to accept both of these, and then I'll click Load Families. And after a minute or two here, you're going to see the hardware appear. There it is, right? So you can see that it definitely loaded. And then you'll get a nice little report at the end telling you that it completed. And you can even save that report off if you want to keep a record of that. Now, if I pull that folder back forward again, let's do a refresh here. There it is. Okay, so there's the regular backup, the sort of standard Windows or Revit backup, but here's the CTC backup with this extra information on the end of the name there. So, you know, it's always good to have extra backups, so I think that's a good idea to do that. And then, of course, you can archive those off somewhere if you like. So, so that's a really simple example of that. But you can also use this to, you know, within the current file. Okay, I actually I'm going to take this file here and I'm going to close it, and I'm going to repeat that same step with sorry, the backups threw me off there. Okay, so it looks like it did save it. So let's reopen the backup, right? So I'll do it on the backup this time. Okay, so I want to kind of show you that that same thing, because I was doing it within the same file, there was another way I could have done it. So this is, there's another button right here that says current document. And when I click on that, it will load just the document that you currently have open. So it saves me the trouble of having to go point to the file here, okay? And instead it shows me all of the stuff that's currently loaded in here. And it's kind of like looking at the families branch on the browser. And then if I expand the categories, here's casework. What is really interesting about this is you may be aware that when you load a family into another family, that it kind of remembers where that family came from, right? And then if you do reload, it tries to look for it in that same location. Well, there's a report paths button right here, which I think is really interesting. There's a little message here, and then I'll click continue. And it'll go through and read each of those families and tell me where they're coming from. And you can see here that I've got a path called old, what, you know, so it's going from a different folder maybe than where I really want to get these from. Okay, so when we went through the process a moment ago, okay, I actually did this backwards here. Okay, I wanted to show you this first and then show you the process I just showed you. But when we did that process a moment ago, so the way I'm going to do it is to just reopen the finished version now, because you've already seen me load it in. But I'm going to run that path thing again. And you remember a moment ago it said old, but now let's check this again. Okay, so now you can see that it's pointing to the 01 folder that I'm in. So not only was I able to batch load in all of these different families, but it also kind of reset that path to this new location. So that's kind of a handy benefit of using this tool, right? Okay, so what about the nested components? There's actually a nested shared component in here. So we can also use the family loader to load things in, like I said, with projects as well as with other families. Right now I'm working in another family. So if I open up, say, another project here, so I've got, well, let's just load it in the project I have in the background, which is this guy right here called Start. Okay, not sure what the delay is on that. Okay, there it is, right? Just sort of place one of these in, and then, you know, just kind of look at that, spin it around, right? It's the same family. Let's just change the scale here so it doesn't look quite so chunky. All right, so, you know, there it is loaded into this project. Well, now, if you look down here, you can see that under specialty equipment, that also loaded things like the label holder, the lock, and the pull. Now, you know, if I click on this thing and I, you know, check here, it says locks, but I've got to go to, well, the locks are not displaying. All right, well, so that's something I will have to correct on my family there. But let's go back to the family loader here. And so I could reload, here I'm going to actually change this to shaded view. Okay, so this is sort of this gray color right now. So the version that I'm going to reload just has changed the material. It's just a really simple change that I want you to see. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to browse to that folder again. And this time I'm going to load in the base cabinet, and let's browse back out to the folder in front of that, and also add this start file right here. So I'm adding 2 files to the list, and then the families I'm going to add this time are going to be the hardware. So I'm going to select all of those and add them and click OK. And then this time I'm only going to load it into families that already have them, because one of the door fronts versions of these doesn't have any hardware. It sort of has an integral pull. So that'll prevent it from being loaded into families that don't need it. And then when we load the families, if I've done everything correctly here, these things should turn green. I just made a green colored material just to kind of indicate some sort of a change. And we'll click OK on that, and we'll close that, and let's see, let's try it over here. All right, well, I messed something up. Anyway, let's move on. Live TV, right? So that's totally a problem with my prepped files, not a problem with the CTC tool. So we can go in the other direction too. Okay, so we're importing families here. We can also export them. Now, you've been able to do this in Revit for some time. If you right-click the Families branch, you can go to Save. The trouble with the Revit way of doing it is there's very few options. The only options are everything, all families, or a specific family, which seems kind of drastic to me. You either get everything or you get one. Like, there's no way to say, I just want a collection of stuff in between. So usually people have to export everything and then delete the stuff that they don't want, right? So let me close a few of these files here. Not going to save that. Close this. Not going to save that. And this one as well. Okay, so let's open up something that we can export from. And I'm sure you've all seen our friend, the Advanced Sample Project before. So here's a version of that. And let's just say that we want to export some of the families from this file, right? So again, we could use the out-of-the-box way, and we'd have to take everything, or we can go to the family exporter here, which is also part of the free tools in the Batch Suite. And what I really like about this is the very first thing you see is it's listed by category. So if you were only interested in the doors, for example, you could just check that category. In fact, you could expand that category and choose specific doors if you wanted to. So you could either grab them all, or if you just grab some of them. Now, you could group this by category or geometry. With geometry, it'll just go model and annotation. So I think by category is a little nicer. They even have a search here. So notice that I'm in the Advanced Sample Project, so everything is prefixed with M. So if I type M underscore, for example, and run the search, it's going to, let me uncheck something here. I think that's what I was supposed to do. Okay, let's try that now. Okay, so there we go. It was working. I just didn't notice. Okay, most of these have an M underscore, so that's not giving me very much, right? So let's do something else that might be on here, something a little bit more specific, like maybe wood. Okay, well, that limited us now to just one detail item that has the word wood, or flush. We expect that we should see a few more, and of course under doors you can see that there's flush. So if I only wanted to export the flush doors, then using the search capability I could do that. And then what I want to do is set my folder. Now you can see it remembered the path, but there is a browse button here where you can point to it. So I've got a folder called Exported Families, and you can even tell it to create subfolders within that path based on the kind of geometry it is. So if I choose the category option, it'll do exported families, but then it'll create a folder called doors, for the doors, and a folder called furniture for the furniture, and so on. You can even add prefixes and suffixes to the names. So this is something you can't do with the out-of-the-box option. It'll allow you to rename the families as they're being exported. So you can see I just put in EXP right here for export, and I'm only exporting 4 families just so that it'll go quickly. You can obviously do many more if you want to, but we don't want to sit and watch a progress bar. You'll get a nice message at the end telling you that it was successful, and if it wasn't successful, it'll tell you where it failed, which is also really handy. And then, of course, if I go look at that folder in Windows Explorer, there's a doors folder because we asked for it by category, and there's all of the families complete with an EXP suffix in front of each of the names. So really kind of takes the idea of exporting families to the next level by just giving you some additional useful options for you to control exactly how that happens. Now, if you've got the Express Tools, then something you may not have even noticed is that in Windows Explorer, it actually loads in a tool that I use, I think, every day. I mean, I literally use this tool every day. How many times have you told people not to double-click a file in Windows Explorer, right? Because especially if you, like most firms, you've got multiple versions of Revit installed, and it will almost always launch the wrong Revit. Or if it's a workshare enabled file, you know, you might get problems where it tries to open up the central file, or all kinds of things for all the reasons that you've told your people, you know, let's use the open command. Well, if you right-click a file in Explorer with the Express Tools loaded, you'll have Revit properties on that right-click menu. And when you choose that, you get this nice little dialog that tells you the version that it was saved in. In this case, that one was saved in 2014. And then down here, you'll get Open In, and there'll be a drop-down list of all the Revits you have installed. Now, in my case, I don't have 2014 installed, so it just goes to the next version after that. And if I did try and click Open, it would warn me that I'm going to upgrade the file. I'm going to say no here, right, to cancel that. But it gives you other useful information about this as well. So each one of these, right, Revit properties. So if you forgot which version this file was saved in, this is a great way to check without going through the trouble of trying to open it first, waiting for an upgrade, having to cancel, or, you know, again, that problem where folks, you know, open, you know, try and double click and they get the wrong version of Revit. You know, that tool kind of eliminates all those problems. So it's really handy, and it's just sort of installed right in Explorer. There's, you know, no interface, so to speak. Okay, another one that I use, probably not, I mean, I don't use it every day, but I do use it frequently. I mentioned before that I do a lot of lynda.com training, and some of you might be aware of the training that I do there. Well, when it comes time to update a course, I've got this huge file, huge folder rather, full of files that I want to reuse in the new version of the course, and they all need to be upgraded. So I could go painstakingly through each one and, you know, open them up manually, or you can look for some way to batch process that. And the Express Tools has a tool for that purpose. Now, this one is not free. This is part of the BIM Batch Suite. So I am going to focus mainly on free tools here, but I did want to just quickly show you this tool as a not free tool that I think is worth, you know, the cost of entry if you need to do this a lot. So if you've got a whole library in your office and the new version comes out, and you want to keep the old library where it was, but you want to upgrade it to the new version so that users don't have to, this tool can pay for itself just for that benefit alone. So when you click on it, you know, it's got a similar interface where you're either going to be able to load projects or families. So you could point to a bunch of project files if you want to do that, or family files if you want to do that. And so I'm just going to point to some things here, and I'm not necessarily going to go through with the process, but I just want you to see what the interface looks like when you choose some of these options. So let's do this folder right here. Now, initially, didn't show me anything because I didn't check include subfolders. So I'll do that, and I'll click this little refresh button, and now it'll read everything. Now, I just showed you a tool that you can right-click in Windows Explorer to show you what version the file is. Well, this is also going to report what version it is, which is really handy. So you can kind of see in the whole list now which versions everything is. And then you get to selectively choose with the checkbox here which files you want to upgrade. Now, it also tells you whether they're Workshare enabled or not. So you can see down here I do have one that's Workshare enabled. When you're upgrading it, you have similar tools that I just showed you with the exporting. So you could add prefixes and suffixes, and you could search for different kinds of file names and so on. Now here, the default option is to copy the files to a new location. So again, if you're upgrading your library of families and you want to just keep your original library for the people still using 2017, but you want to upgrade it to 2018, for example, you could browse to a new location for that 2018 content. And you even have options to, right here, to create relative subfolders. So it'll keep your whole folder structure intact when it copies it over. You can also have it remake central files so that they work correctly and they don't have the wrong paths. And then this one here will manage the links for you. So it will copy all the Revit links and upgrade those. It does warn you that it might create duplicates depending on how you have those set up. But in my tests, if those links are in their own links folder, it usually does a pretty good job of just maintaining that. Now, the other option is to upgrade it in place. So just leave it where it is and upgrade it right there. Obviously, that's going to overwrite the existing files, so you want to be careful about that. Now, we have similar options with families, so I'll just browse to a similar folder here. I just want to show you the options. Again, this isn't one of the free tools, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I do just want to kind of point it out to you because I do think it's a really cool tool. So let's point to that same folder, include subfolders, refresh, and so there it lists all the different families. But what I wanted to show you here is now it'll tell you whether those families have a type catalog or not. Now, there really isn't anything that needs to be upgraded on a type catalog, but it's nice to have that information. Little misleading here, there's a checkbox implying you could check it. You're not checking the catalog box, but it's just letting you know that it exists. And then the same prefixes and suffixes, copy to a new folder, upgrade in the current location. So I do really like this tool. I use it like I said, again, when I'm getting ready to update a course or if I want to take an entire library and move it over to the new version, it's a very handy tool to have. All right, so the next one, what do we got here? Okay, this one is super simple. Not a whole lot to show, but moving into the next suite here, this is, this is the BIM Manager Suite, if I got the name correctly. There's Batch, there's BIM Manager, and there's Project, but I want to get the exact name. So it's the CTC BIM Manager Suite, so I did say that right. So again, there's a few free tools here. So I'm going to show you two of these. I'm going to show you the Revision Cloud Remover first, which is a really, really simple tool. It does exactly what its name says it will. So here on the third floor of this project, I have a revision cloud for revision number 2. And on the south elevation, I have a similar revision cloud. And I don't have a tag for that one, but that one is also revision number 2. And then somewhere else, I think it was the enlarged floor plan. Yeah, there it is. It's kind of ghosted in here. So that's revision number 1, but it's hidden right now. So the idea is, let's say you want to get rid of all of these, right? These old revisions, you don't need them anymore. So let me open up a sheet here that shows this particular file. I was too lazy to make a new sheet, so I just put it on another one. So this is an interior elevation sheet, but here it is right there. Notice that this is showing revision number 1, okay? So this tool does exactly what it says it will, okay? Revision Cloud Remover. You're just going to see all the revisions listed. You could check one, you could check both, okay? I'm going to do revision 1. And then down here, if you want to keep the record on the sheet that this sheet was issued under that revision, you can check this box, which I think is kind of nice. So even though it'll get rid of the cloud, the fact that this was issued in revision 1 will remain. So when I click remove, let's double click in here and notice that that cloud is gone. Okay, so I can't select it anymore. And but of course, this sheet still tells me that it's got revision 1. Okay, so really simple tool. Again, that's the first free offering in the BIM Manager Suite, but can definitely be handy in these large projects that have a lot of revisions if you want to do some cleanup. Okay, there's a similar tool called Project Cleaner. I'm not going to demonstrate that one right now, but it does similar things. It allows you to go in and kind of selectively purge stuff. This one I am going to show you. This one's called Family Tools. Now, as far as I know, I could be wrong about this, not an expert on every one of the CTC tools, but as far as I know, this is the only one that actually runs separately from Revit. In other words, I can click into Revit and that family tools is still running. You know, it's kind of like a separate application. So you can actually run this thing and then switch back and forth between Revit. Most of the other tools are modal, meaning that, you know, when you're in the dialog, you have to finish what you're doing before you can go back to Revit. So this has got several tabs of things you can do. Now, I've had this little batch routine that I've run for years to delete backup files. Backup files are great. We love backups. You know, if something happens and we lose a file, we don't want to lose work. So, you know, we like to create backups. But of course, they can accumulate over time. And after a while, you might want to clean things up, you know, and say, okay, I don't need these backups from a couple weeks ago. I want to get rid of those. So this has a tool for that. You just browse to the folder that you want to clean up. So just jump over there. Got a folder with some backups in it. And it's this guy right here. And let me just show you with that folder in Windows Explorer before we delete it so that you can see, right? So there's some backups, okay? So there's all the files. And of course, what's cool about this is you can actually choose which ones you want to delete. The little batch routine that I've been running for years it just does it, right? It does the whole folder. And any subfolders, it doesn't ask you any questions first. But this one, if you say include subfolders, it'll list them all out and you'll be able to check and uncheck. And then when you're ready and you're happy with your selection, you just say delete selected backups. It says, are you sure? You click OK, and it tells me that it did 4 of them. And of course, you can see those backups are now gone, right? So really super simple, okay? All right, so there's also a couple tools here for doing things like the CTC tools actually have a couple different ways to deal with this idea of what version is the file, right? So I'm going to browse to that same folder that I was in earlier. And this just detects the file version. It doesn't do anything with them. It's not going to upgrade or anything like that. But if you just want to know, you know, what version a file is, right? So I browse to that folder. The recursive search is going to look in all the subfolders. You can see them all listed here. And right now it's blank. Well, the little gotcha here is there's a button. So you have to kind of, when you're ready, click detect versions. But when you do that, it'll go through and it'll tell you what the versions of all those files are. So you can right-click each one in Windows Explorer with the tool I showed you earlier. You can run the upgrader and kind of get a list that way. Or you can use this tool. So there's a couple different ways that you can see what versions files are and then make decisions about which ones you want to upgrade or whether you want to put them in different folders or what have you. Now, there's 2 tabs here that deal with shared parameters. So if you do a lot of content, you probably work with shared parameters. And sometimes, even though best practice says one shared parameter file, please, you end up with multiple shared parameter files for whatever reason. Maybe it's, you know, maybe you inherited one from somewhere else. Maybe somebody didn't understand that we had one already, whatever the reason is. So this first tab allows you to compare to. So I'm going to browse to, let's see. I wish it would remember that location. I'm going to browse to that same location. Okay, right here. So I've got a folder. And you know, if I do something like 2 client shared parameter files, that's kind of a special case that I don't suspect that unless you're doing work for clients that you would run into. That's a legitimate reason to have multiple ones. Well, if I compare this, I'm really not going to get for anything very satisfying because they're 2 totally different shared parameter files for 2 totally different clients. You can see down here I've got nothing in common. But if I instead point to my shared parameter file and compare that to the one that Revit published several years back on Autodesk Seek. Now these days Autodesk Seek is no more, it's now BIM Object, but so I'm not really sure where you would find this Seek shared parameter file now, if BIM Object maintains it or not. But anyway, let's compare those 2. Well, when I built my shared parameter file, I started with the Revit one. So there is quite a bit in common between these 2. But you can see down here, parameter conflicts. I do have one parameter that's in conflict with a GUID mismatch. And then I have a a couple other things here. I've got many common groups and many common parameters. Now on the Merge tab, you could point to the same two files, and then you could start merging those files together. So if I, again, point to these files, and this one. So you're going from this file to this file, right? And I could do, I see the list here, and then I can do a preview of that, right? Actually, let me swap the files here. I think it's still thinking. See, I should have left well enough alone. Well, anyway, when you're ready, you can merge the two. I don't know why that didn't. Okay, well, now it's all grayed out. Am I missing a dialogue somewhere? All right, well, when it's done, it's going to suggest a name down here. So you'll be able to check which things you want to merge in. And so in other words, what are you always told not to do with a shared parameter file? You're told not to edit it manually. And so if you don't have a tool like this that actually allows you to go in and do it correctly, then it can corrupt the file. So the nice thing about this tool is that it, it builds the file correctly. And so, I don't know, I'm going to give this one more go at, there we go. Okay, so it just needed a refresh. All right, so, I would check the ones that I want to merge in there, and then I could say merge and preview. Okay, now I think I can do merge and preview here, and it still isn't, yeah, well, no, I guess it just did it, right? Oh, no, here, save results. So until I click save results, it's not permanent. So I get to preview through all the changes that it's making here and make sure that I'm happy with them before I click save. And then the other thing that it will do, let me just go ahead and save the merge results because these are copies anyway. But the other thing that I want to show you here that it will do is it will actually make a backup. So here's my original one, and it added that word merged at the end, right? So here's the merged one. So that's the one that it just saved today. So you still have your original just in case. So if you did something wrong and you messed it up, you can always go back. So it's not going to just kind of make something and then you're out of luck. It does do a backup. Here's my favorite tab on this tool, type catalog. So again, I build a lot of content. And so if you're building a lot of content with type catalogs, this tool is designed to look at Excel files and turn them into the TXT files. All right. So let me just quick do a demonstration of this. I'm going to close this file, and I'm going to open up just a family here. And let's see, family tools here. Okay. So if you look at my Windows Explorer, B1, B3, B4 all have type catalogs. Okay. Well, they have CSV files. Okay, and if I double-click one of these, it's loading on my other screen, so I'll pull it over here as soon as it's loaded. Okay, this is what the type catalog looks like, right? So it's a formatted type catalog. So what I'm going to do is come over here. I'm going to open B08, and of course, when you open this in Revit, you've got the option here to export a family types. So I'll do that, and I'll put it in the same folder. Now, at that point, that's a valid type catalog. But if we look at that in Excel, you might want to clean it up because, of course, this file didn't have any, there's nothing really going on with it. That file only had one type in it. Okay, so that's what I was trying to say. And I can never browse folders and talk at the same time, so my apologies there. All right, family tools and backups, and then I'm going to change this to all files. And there's that TXT file that was just created, right? So I'm going to open that up, and of course it recognizes that it's a delimited text file. So I'm going to say it's delimited, and it's comma delimited, and finish it, right? So I get this file here, and it only had these two types in there, right? So, all this stuff. Well, let's say that, I don't know, let's say I don't need, these parameters in the shared parameter file. So I'm just going to delete those columns, or I call that a shared parameter file. I don't need those parameters in the type catalog, okay? So let me do a save as now. and I'm going to save this as a comma delimited CSV file and save it. So, you know, the nice thing about Excel is it makes it really easy to edit one of these type catalogs. Of course, I could also add, and for now I'm just going to make, you know, another one here. I'll just change this number, okay, so that it's a different name. Okay, so I'll save that too, right? So I've added another type. I've deleted some columns, right? Let's close out of here. Okay, now I don't even need this open to run the family tools. Well, what this tool does is it lets me browse to that folder and grab that. It recognizes all those CSV files. I can check all of them. And then with a simple click of a button here, right? So notice that at the moment, the only one that's, let's delete this one. This is the one that was exported from Revit. So none of them have TXT files. But as soon as I run this, it'll say type catalog is complete. And now they all have TXT files. And if you create a project and load in one of these families now, right? So I'll go to component, load, point to that location. And I'm not going to do the one I just, well, let's do it. What the heck? Let's do the one I monkeyed around with. Hey, look at that. It actually works, right? And, you know, so I could select this guy, and I was worried about that one because I edited it so quickly. The others are nicer type catalogs. But now I can go ahead and load that in and place those. So as you can see, if you're doing a lot of type catalog work, that tool is just a huge benefit, because otherwise you got to make sure you save it correctly and that you know, rename it, and, you know, it's a couple extra steps. So anyway, family tools, great tool. I do use that quite a bit, and especially when I'm doing a lot of content work. All right, let's see. How are we doing on time here? Okay, not too bad, actually. Let's keep going. All right, so moving on to the BIM Project Suite then. Let me open up a file. Just to keep this all organized, I did a separate file for each one of these. So in this one, I'm going to show you the detail link. So detail link is a free tool in the BIM Project Suite. I've just got a simple file here. It's just an empty file. And in this folder, I've got a bunch of DWG files, which are details. And I've even got one that's an image file. That's an old scanned detail from an old hand drawing. So you can see right now that if you look at this project browser, this is a empty project, default template. There are no drafting views or any detail views. So I go to the Express Tools, and on the BIM Project Suite under Free Tools, whoa, that was weird. We have Detail Link. And it's a similar interface that we've already seen. So here we're going to select the DWG files. Here we're going to select the image files. So I'm going to do Add Details. I'm going to browse to this location, that DWG folder that I showed you. There they all are. I'll select, well, to save a little time here, I could do Select All, okay? But what I'm going to do is just to kind of keep this from taking too long, I'll just grab a couple of these. So maybe I'll do this one, and this one. So just 4 of them should be good. And then I only had one image file anyway in that folder. So I'll just add that one. And then right here it says automatically create new drafting views. Or you could use this option and enter the name of the drafting views you want. If you do the automatically, it's going to make the names match the DWG. So I'm fine with that. Now, it remembered the settings I chose last time, but these are all the standard settings for importing DWG files. So the first option is, do you want to link it or import it? I'm going to link them. Where do you want to put them? Well, because they're details and I have no idea where people put the origins, I'm going to do center to center just to make sure that something shows up on screen. Do you want to preserve the colors? Do you want to force them to black and white? I'm going to force them to black and white. Some of the layers, all the layers, I'll do all. And then I'm pretty sure these are all in inches. So I'm just going to set the units to inches. Okay, but those are all the standard options that you would have if you linked DWGs manually. And then with the images, I'm just going to place it center to center. And this asks for the DPI. Now, in order to calculate the DPI, you have to know how big the original image file is. And then you can divide that by how big you want it to be. So this current image file is 1,600 pixels across by about 2,000 tall. So at 200 DPI, it's going to be about 10 inches tall by, maybe about 8 inches across. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and I'll click Import Link, and it'll run through and process them all. I get a report once again. I'll click OK, and I'll close that. And then over here, I've got a drafting view for each one of those files that came in. So, here's a DWG file, and, here is another DWG, and I'm looking for the, there it is. This is the image file. Now, I mentioned the resolution thing, right? I chose 200. If I do it again, just to show you the difference, so I'll add an image file, I'll browse to the same folder. I always forget to do search again. If I do search again, that's the same thing instead of clicking browse. But I always forget to do, oh, see? All right, I forgot to add it. There it is. Okay, so there it is. But this time I'm going to set this to 300. So now I'm still working with the same amount of resolution overall, same width and height of the image, but I'm dividing it now by 300 pixels instead of 200 pixels. And, sorry, let me do this option as well here. Select an existing drafting view, because I want to just put it on the same drafting view so you can see the difference. So when I do select an existing drafting view and I do import, now it'll ask me which view I want to put it on. And this one is called wall detail. So I'll put it there and I'll click OK and OK and then close that. And there it is right there. So you can see the difference, right? So that's the only real difference that you're going to get when you change that resolution is, how big is that image file in terms of its final sizes here. So if you're bringing in an image and it needs to fit on a certain size sheet, you can do that calculation. Okay, so that is the detail link tool. All right, so pretty handy tool, especially if you have a lot of details that you need to bring in. All right, so let me close this and go to the next file. And all right. So once again, we're back to our old friend, the Revit Advanced Sample Project, okay? So I'm just choosing this one because it's simple and it's familiar, but okay, so here we are. Let me switch to a 3D view, and we'll zoom in on the building here. All right, so this is Quick Select, and for those of you that have used AutoCAD before, this is kind of similar in concept. I mean, I want to make selections in the model based on some kind of criteria. Now, Revit does have ways to do this. You can window everything and filter out what you don't want. You can right-click and do Select Similar. But with Quick Select, it just gives you a few more options. So we're going to go to the free tools here, and we're going to choose Quick Select. And all right, so here's the tool. And so we've got the ability to select across the entire project, the active view, or the current selection. So you always want to think about what to choose here. So I'm going to do the entire project. So whether it's visible or not, obviously a little dangerous if you're, depending on what you're going to edit. But in this case, I'm just making selections. I'm not actually going to perform any edits, but just, current view might be a little bit safer. Now, filter is currently none, okay, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So what I'm going to do is go to category instead, and then here I get a list of all the categories. So the first thing that we're able to do is just choose a category, right? So I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to pick Windows. And I essentially want to see, do I have any windows in this file, right? So I'll choose the category Windows, and if you want, you can, it says optional, you could further filter it by the parameters of the windows. So not only select the windows, but select the windows that are a certain width or, a certain material or a certain, area, whatever the property might be. I'm just going to select all the windows. I'm going to say add it to a selection set, and then I'll do update here. Okay. Now that shows them over here. Okay, that for that category, I've got 24 windows, and here's how they break down in terms of type. So they're all the same type window, as you can see here. Now, what's cool about these buttons here is once you've made that selection, you can stay right in the tool and use your temporary hide isolate. So I could say, let's isolate those elements, and then they show up over here, and then I could click the little binoculars here, and it will zoom right in on those objects, right? So if I'm not sure where those objects are, this is a really handy way to make sure that I've selected the right thing before I get out of this command, right? Okay, so let me kind of clear that and turn off the temporary hide, okay? And then I'll just click over here, and of course, unfortunately, you can't zoom here, so you have to do it here, right? So I'll do zoom to fit. Okay, so you do have to, use the tools inside this window instead of doing it here. Otherwise, you have to close the window. All right, let's try walls, okay? Just to show you one more example. This time, I'm going to go by parameter, and let's say that I'm looking for walls of a certain width. So I'm going to go to the width parameter, and then you get all these really cool options. Equals, does not equal, contains, whatever, right? So I'm going to say walls that are either greater than or equal to 6 inches, which is about 150 millimeters, right? Remember, this is a metric project, so I'm going to put in 150 there and update the selection set. So here's the walls there, and it says 0, right? So apparently there are none that are greater than or equal. But here's the cool thing. You get another drop-down list, and it allows you to choose the values that are actually valid for that, for that search, right? So I could do 200 here. Now, the other thing is add to selection set. Well, I don't have a selection set. So what I want to do is replace the selection set, and then I'll update, and now I get some results, right? So if I do add to selection set and I had nothing, then, there was nothing to add to it. But now you can see it's kind of highlighted those walls. And if I change the filtering rule and I update it again, you can see different walls select. And then once again, I can isolate those elements and I can zoom in on them. And, so you can start to use this tool to evaluate, the different parts and pieces. So it could be a great tool to select things, of course, so that you can move on to the next step. It can also be a nice tool in a project that you've never been in before to just kind of understand what's what, right? So as you kind of run through here. Now, let me just show you one last quick example. I'm going to close out of there. I'm going to reset the temporary hide. And then you remember that filter list was empty. Well, it was literally these filters it was talking about. So if I go to filters and I create a new filter, and I'll just leave the name filter 1. And let me just find, I don't know, furniture, for example. And then I'm going to say furniture and whose, I don't know, comments does not equal nothing. And that should give me all the furniture, I would hope. I'll find out in a minute. And then we'll go to quick select. And now you'll see filter shows me that filter 1. So when they talk about filter here, they're talking about the filters that are already in your project. So if you've got a lot of filters in your project, you can actually use those to make selections. So let me see what happens when I do that. Well, it only got one object. Interesting, and it was a material. So obviously I did something wrong there. I might not have checked the right I might not have checked the right thing. But really all I wanted you to see was that it shows on the filter list. I didn't think through my filter very carefully, but that's how you get items on the filter list. Those are Revit filters that appear there. So anyway, the Quick Select tool is a very powerful tool because it gives you access to the full collection of properties and parameters that are available in your Revit project and lets you use those as the basis for selection. Now, I'm going to stay right here in this same file and talk about a tool that if you don't have one already, you need to, and even if you do have one, you need to download the BIM Project Suite right away, and this is one of the free tools, and it's a tool that everybody should have in their arsenal, and that's some sort of a renumbering tool. And CTC's renumbering tool is pretty nice because it's not limited to just rooms or doors. A lot of the renumber tools that are out there are room renumber tools or door renumber tools. Now, don't get me wrong, those are handy features to have, but the CTC tool goes a little bit beyond that. So let me show it to you here. So under free tools, renumbering, you can renumber just about anything with this tool. So it does have a dedicated tab for rooms, doors, grids, and details. Okay, so this is literally the detailed numbers for viewports on a sheet, right? Now, I don't have any sheets set up in this file, so I'm not going to show that one, but I'll show the first 3 tabs here. So let's start with rooms. And I'm just going to focus on this area of the plan that I'm zoomed in on. Let's just say that we're going to add another room, and so I need to kind of configure the numbering in this portion of the space. And also, let's just so we can use a couple of these other fields in here, let's pretend that this is building A of a 3-building campus. So we're going to have building A, B, and C, right? So I'm going to put an A prefix in front of my room names. Okay, so that's what that means. You can do the same thing with suffix, and you can add a separator if you want to. So it could be a dash or an underscore, or, you know, really any character you want. Now, if you don't want to renumber the entire floor plan, you can start wherever you want to start. So cafeteria is currently 121. So I'm going to start at number 120. Okay, so let's say I'm going to allow for that new room that I want to put in. Actually, let's start at 121, just so I don't have problems with something that's off screen. So let's start at 121, the existing cafeteria, but then we're going to renumber from there. Okay, and I'm not going to use a separator in this case. And then this is a really handy thing. If you want to avoid those error messages, duplicate mark values found, choose the auto swap room number. So what that'll do is it'll just make sure that you never have a duplicate number. And so if there is a duplicate number already, it'll just swap it out with the one that you're, you know, the one you're adding, okay, and it'll take care of that for you. So really handy. Now down here it says press escape to exit. So the way this works is when you're ready, you've got the parameters you want, you go to renumber, and then you just start clicking on the rooms that you want to renumber. So let's say that we're going to keep the cafeteria at 21, but we want to add the A, and then let's say this is going to be 22, and this is going to be 23, and you know, then I'm going to press escape maybe, and change this to 25 and start again. So that's, I'm skipping now because I want to add that extra room, and then I'll keep going, right? So that's what you do when you want to add in that new room and sequence there, is you just kind of press escape in the middle, change the start sequence, and then keep going, right? So you can see that I've renumbered all of the rooms in that location. Let's do this one too. And they now have the letter A in front of them, and they have these new numbers applied, right? So next, the most obvious thing now is that none of the door numbers match, right? So we move right over to the door tab, and once again, we could do a prefix if we wanted to. We could just do sequential numbering if that's what we're interested in, or there's room-based numbering, which is what I'm going to do. So it does allow you to choose a phase, so because rooms are per phase, so I'm going to leave that alone. And as far as a separator goes, I'll put in a dash and then a suffix of A. Now the way that's going to work is just simply that if there's two rooms or two doors in the room, it'll just do A and B, right? Let's auto swap again, and let's go to renumber, right? So this is A122, but it's actually pointing into this room, right? So you see how it saw a different number there, right? So I just start touching each of these, and it's just looking at the rooms that it belongs to and fixing those numbers. Now here I've got 2 pointing into this admin space. So that's A127, but as soon as I click this one, then it becomes, it's a little tough to see, but it becomes A and B, right? Keep going here. Let me press escape, kind of click over here and just sort of zoom in a little so you can see it a little better, right? There's A and there's B, okay? So that's what it does when it encounters 2 doors in the same space. Now, grids are no different, right? I'll just quickly show you the grid numbering here, just so we can peek it in there, all right? Again, if you want a prefix, start the sequence. Let's start at 10, just so we can see something different, and auto swap and renumber. So this is going to be grid 10. I'm going to skip that one, go to that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one, right? And then I'll press escape. And because this is just the one oddball, I'll just do that one manually, right? A10.1, okay? So, you know, kind of works the same way. So once you kind of get the hang of it, same basic idea. You can have prefixes, suffixes, separators, and you just sort of click through them. Now, with the general option, okay, let's switch views. This will number anything, anything that's got a mark value, right? So it says here, use this tab to renumber anything with a mark value, instance parameter. So right now what you're seeing is these tables, if I edit type on that table, that's a 4T01 type, okay, and they're all the same. But maybe I want to actually give these table numbers. So, you know, if we're going to do a seating chart or something, you're going to sit at table 5 and, you know, somebody else is sitting at table 7. Okay, so that's what I want to use the general for here. So again, we could use A if we want to, prefix, for building A. And I'm just going to start the sequence at 1 here. Okay, so no separator, auto swap just because, and then I'll go ahead and click on renumber. Now, these are in groups, so I don't know if I'm going to have a problem here. I'm tabbing in, so let me just do a couple of them. I think it's working, but how do we know? Let's grab these tags, filter, check none, furniture tags, click OK, and then I went ahead and created an instance tag. It did work. Okay, good. So I was tabbing in each time, right? But that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just whatever order I picked them in. So if you want to individually number a bunch of things that don't normally number, right? Doors auto number and windows auto number, but furniture does not. Then this tool is a great way for you to just sort of go through and sequentially number a bunch of stuff. So once again, having a room numbering tool is great. Having a door numbering tool is great. And that's probably what you need 95% of the time. But having these additional numbering features is also really kind of handy. So this is a great little renumbering tool, and it's free. Now, if you want more details on any of these tools and how to get them and how to install them, what's free, what's not free, you can certainly talk to the folks at CTC. They're incredibly helpful. But generally, once you install, after the trial is over, the free tools continue to work, and the paid tools you have to have a license for.